Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Jennifer McGregor, and I'm the Executive Director of the Lake Forest Preservation Foundation. Since 1976, the Lake Forest Preservation Foundation has protected the architectural heritage and historic beauty of our community. Thanks to you, more than $4 million has helped preserve the character and spirit of Lake Forest. As many of you know, our foundation will be celebrating our 50th anniversary next year, and we'll be sharing more of our scheduled plans for our year-long celebration in the coming months. Of note, we'll be doing some historic trolley tours in May. Sounds exciting, doesn't it? Our 50th fancy soiree in June, and then a 2-day preservation symposium that we're co-hosting at Ragdale, and that'll be in the middle of October 2026. We'd like to quickly thank our current corporate sponsors, see how I said that, because there's always an opportunity to participate, for our 50th, which include Blue Pine, Smith's Men's Store, Susie Horner Design Collective, Valentina, Pennies from Heaven, Edward Deegan Architecture and Interiors, and Jenny Brown Design. There are several of you here tonight. Thank you so much. If you're not yet a member of the foundation, we do invite you to join. Participate in so many of the upcoming programs and events ahead. So let's get going. We're delighted to be with all of you tonight for a special program featuring preeminent North Shore landscape architect Craig Bergmann and his head gardener Russell Buvala. I wanted to make sure that I was pronouncing that correctly. As they discuss their debut book, The Art of Fine Gardening. The Art of Fine Gardening, published in May of 2025, showcases 20 gardens in the North Shore developed by Craig during his over 4 decades of integrating design, horticulture, and architecture in his creative process in collaboration with Russ, who's been working alongside Craig for 37 years. Our family had the great fortune of working with Craig and his team after purchasing and restoring a David Adler stable in the Lasker estate, and I remain ever grateful for his vision and guidance and for taking on our very small and humble project. So thank you. As there may be several of you here tonight who have maybe heard this presentation before, I'm told that Craig has actually modified his content for the Preservation Foundation because that's what he does, above and beyond per usual. So please welcome our very special guests, Craig and Russ.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. I'm Craig. I'm Russ. Okay. Russ and I both met each other at just the right time in our lives. Russ was fresh out of college, valedictorian of the horticulture class at U of I, enthusiastic, incredibly smart, more artistic than he knew at the time, and I really needed somebody to help share in the vision of building the company. My former life partner and business start partner, James Grigsby, he passed now, God, 29 years ago. So the most consistent man in my adult life is Russell Buvala. He is not my husband. He is one of my best friends. And we happen to work together, and we haven't killed each other yet. I can't do what I do without trusting somebody to take the creation and build it to the potential that we as designers want it to become. So by default, when we started back in 1981, the garden makers in Lake Forest at the time were like Dodge Freeman, who was an old estate gardener for the Donnellys and the Fields, and we're talking first generation Donnellys, that kind of thing. And he and Ann would share delphinium seeds so Russ and I could try to grow them. And then they told us where they got their seeds, which was the Delphinium Society of England, and we decided to join. Yep. They were $2 a pack, and it was 22 to 25 seeds per pack for $2. So we stratified them. But we really started from the ground up, literally. I have a degree in biology with a minor in botany from DePaul University. I was grandfathered by the state of Illinois when landscape design and architecture firms had to have, if it was the company's name had either design or architecture in the name of the company, one of the principals had to be certified by the state of Illinois. I have never had a design or landscape architecture course formally through education in school. So I've kind of associated myself with very talented people, enthusiastic people, and our average employee has been with us somewhere between 15 and 19 years. So if we're all lucky enough to find a good spot to work, even in this day and age, we have 40-some-year people that have been with us for 15 years, so and that's not typical for young people, They always want to, grass is always greener. Every 2 years they got to have a new experience. A lot of the people that we create a home for with our company are people that wanted to be settled, they just didn't know where to. And as the fact that I'm the older of the two of us, Russ and I are a good decade apart, we're thinking about our
Not that
mortality.
much.
Well, you did have that heart attack.
I did.
And I haven't.
Can't imagine why that would happen.
He had a full head of hair and it was black when I hired him. And look who has the hair. We just decided that, I lost my train of thought. Where was I? Remember?
People remember,
Yeah.
recall, no. People, 15 years,
Young employees.
young employees.
Young employees, yeah.
Starting.
It's just, as we did more complicated work, we required our own staff to take care of it. We were training people to take care of the gardens that originally I conceived, and then I brought in additional LAs or design people. Our first question at an interview is, do you garden? Well, my mom and dad have one, and I work on it the weekends. Do you have a balcony? Do you have pots? Do you have houseplants? The real practical side of it. If you're just book taught, you will kill plants. If you are a gardener, you have killed plants. And you will kill plants. And you will have to make excuses for your enthusiasm, because that Zone 7 plant will not grow in Zone 5 unless it's in a pot and you have a
We keep
minimum
trying.
heated greenhouse. We tried Atlas cedars so many times
Yep.
because we both love them.
Yep.
So, but we decided to kind of celebrate the decades that the company has built so many beautiful projects by doing a book. We've been talking about doing a book for 20 years, and it finally came to fruition. We thought COVID was going to be our time to write the book because we were all going to have free time. We never got busier, and we've never stopped being busy. COVID was the best thing for an essential landscape business in the state of Illinois when you work for the governor. So that helped us a lot. We have a real consistency about our work if you follow it, and I think it's because it's horticulturally based as well as design based. And we read the site as much of what we inherit. We spend more time analyzing why something's growing there in the first place to then know how we can grow what we want to grow, as a change out or as an amendment, an enhancement, whatever. When you love what you do and you want to remember from season to season or year to year, you take a lot of photographs. We had a really hard time figuring out which photos to use for the book because we have over 18,000 images.
Yeah.
And
That was a lot of fun.
most of them were slides, and when you can
That was more
imagine,
fun.
that was more fun. Yeah, when we gave talks over the years, we would take slide carousels with us in our carry-on. It's funny how things have changed, and not all for the better. But some of the pictures in our book are actually from our cell phones. So the gritty ones are the oldest ones that had to be converted from slides or transparencies. But, like us, we change with time, so a photograph will change with time, but we wanted to capture it at least for the moment. And we had one of our best compliments as a response to the book that I've heard so far from a man in the audience tonight who has heard us talk before. He said, "I have read every word," as well as looked at the pictures. We really wanted to write a book that was worth reading. And we've been enthusiastically supported, and we never wrote it to make money. We wrote it to share. We had the garden center because we thought it'd be great that if you couldn't afford to build a garden at the level that would be to hire a professional service to do it, we should at least be able to provide you with the palette of plants to use so you could do it yourself. And after how many years was Winthrop Harbor around?
Till 2005, so 15?
15 years or
16,
so?
16,
We were about ready to start on a growth trajectory, and I put a group of business friends, which some were clients and some were just friends, together. And the first words out of one of the assembled groups, one of my friends said, "So, is this garden center a hobby or part of your business?" Because we showed the numbers. We always offered at least 700 herbaceous perennials at a time, varieties at once. And there was 150 woody varieties. And our average sale was $128. And we grossed total profit for 8 months of being open of somewhere around $22,000. So, and we had
It was a
full-time.
hobby. It's a great hobby.
It was a great hobby. We had Russ overseeing the display gardens. We had Jose working full-time on them. Then we had Russ's wife at the time propagating all over the place, and then Jane, our grower, got ducks, and then they pooped too much in the duck pond, so then it became another thing. It was a lot of fun, but it was, it was at the expense of time and deflection. Do you know what I mean? So I wrote a letter to my clients and said, to better serve you, we're closing the garden center, so we can spend the time in the gardens that people have trusted us with. And I think that was a good move. A lot of people will still point out the plants that are still growing from the country garden, which I think is great.
An arborist came to me just the other day, and he talked about the different plants that he still has in his garden that he came and bought at the garden center.
Yeah. I mean,
this tree is 25 feet tall now.
Yeah. How many folks in the audience are gardeners? Good. Good. How many aren't? Why? You live longer. I'm 94.
I like looking.
So, we all do. Yeah. Gardeners are voyeurs. They're also very generous people. I've never met a real gardener that hasn't wanted to share something from their garden, whether it's information or a cutting or something. First time I went to Ireland, I got into Helen Dillon's garden in her backyard in Dublin. And she said, well, take this. She had a begonia fuchsioides, which is a begonia that looks like a fuchsia when it flowers. And we had the pink one at home, but hers was red-orange. And she bought it at her local hardware store. And you're in Ireland, right? We can't get an orange begonia fuchsioides in Chicago, but she can get one at the hardware store.
Yep.
Priorities. Gardening means something different in Europe, many other countries, in many other states beyond Illinois. We really, our quest was to educate people to what a garden could be. When we first started, the only people that had gardens were either people that owned estates that had them before, or people that were hobbyists that had the time to give it. There were a lot less full-time working people that were gardening because there wasn't the accessibility to materials and even information at that point. So it was fun for us, and we were both kids. I was, You were 22.
Well, if you're
so-
20 years older than I am.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I was a kid.
You're 92, so
Yes.
I'm 72.
Yeah. But I mean, it just, this is a long introduction to tell you that it's about the story. It's not about the pictures. We'll show you some pictures. But there's no way that I could have broached a profile of the company's history of garden making if it didn't include Russ. Because Russ built a garden care department based on what our jobs demanded of him. And then he assembled a team of people, to do the care part. And then we assembled a grow team. And then, tangentially, if you meet somebody that doesn't have the gentle hands of a gardener, they may have the strong back to pull a burlap tree on a cart, you know what I mean, and loves to dig a hole, so we would vet each other's, potential hires to see where they fit best. Russ does like to steal the best ones for the maintenance department.
If I actually get
So-
a chance to talk to them, they all want to be gardeners.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's easier.
Oh, okay. Let's go on to the talk. Let's go to the first
It's much
piece
easier
here.
than design or construction or employee management.
It's all
That stuff.
difficult.
Yeah.
Gardening is never easy.
So to make sense of how many images we had to pick from, we obviously picked some of our favorites for the book, but we also picked projects that we had good representation photographically, and maybe a good story to tell about it. We edited, we're not talking about every project that we had in the book to tease you to buy the book, right? Or check it out from the library. But we originally, when we first started, because of how enthusiastic we were about herbaceous plants, we were known as the English gardeners of the North Shore. I'm not English, so I can't be an
I'm not
English
either.
gardener. Russ is not English. We were emulating the enthusiasm of herbaceous plant collecting and tending in the Midwest. Okay, first time I went to England, I saw the English gardeners cultivating dandelions as an ornamental plant in a cutting garden. Misplaced plant is a weed, right? So it was very interesting to get out of it took us decades to get out of the label that if you want a beautiful English garden, call Craig, but if I have a mid-century house, or if I want a modern garden, or I want something that is Italianate, we weren't being called because they thought we were pegged into this English style. So one of the things we did in the book is to have a section on English, inspirational gardens, but you'll see that not all of them are. We also, it was fun because one of our clients that has his project in the book, he texted me the other weekend and said, "How many of the projects in the book are in Lake Forest?"
We had to stop.
We had to stop and count them because we don't know. We just know the garden. We know the people. It happens that we were supposed to do. What did the publisher say? How many profiles could we have?
Initially, they wanted like 15 at the most,
At
and
the
then,
most.
then they let us expand.
Yeah.
And
And
that
then
was a bad thing to say to Craig because we expanded quite a bit to 26, and then they said, "How many books are you going to write?" And so we cheated a little bit, and we squeezed all the places that were remote into one story, and so we were able to keep some of the stories in. We just couldn't let some of these things not be in the book.
Yeah, if you're going to give a cross section of your work over the years, you want to be able to have enough differentiation that it looks like you may have matured or changed or whatever. So for tonight's talk, the only images that we're showing you from the book are from historic houses that we've worked on. Okay, so our intention was to preserve the intent of the original architecture and maybe the original garden that the structure sat in. All but one are residential, and almost all of them are Lake Forest, but there's one in Wilmette, there's one in Hinsdale,
This one?
which is this one, yeah. And I think that's about it. The rest of them are,
I
there's
think
a couple,
so.
couple Winnetka.
We
yeah.
pulled a couple of them and
Yeah.
focused on Lake Forest mainly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll give you a little bio just on this first project, just because we're only showing pretty much one image per project. But imagine somebody calling and saying, we have an English style house. Posey Craybill said, you're the only one to do our new garden. And when you come to our front door, it's from a 16th century abbey. I was
29, 30.
I was 30 maybe, and this was my first project in Hinsdale. And this was a gorgeous house. It was built by, we don't know the architect of this one, but it's built out of old clay street pavers and architectural salvage from an English monastery and a couple of Gothic houses that were disassembled for paneling and Tudor boards and everything. It has a gorgeous Ludovici tile terracotta roof. Everything was right. Lead glass windows, they're just gorgeous. And then these people hired Colfax and Fowler to do the interior. You know, so they were true Anglophiles. And we just moved them into adult community in Burr Ridge.
Yeah.
And we've been there since 1989.
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, they just moved to a little place. And they convinced the new owners to stick with us. And damn if the new owners are kind of screwing up the house. I feel really bad. I mean, the house was pristine and everything about it was original. And,
We haven't told them.
you know, their living room is becoming a bar. They're adding a screen porch out the back. The dining room is the kitchen.
They were going to take down a very large Belgian fence.
Yeah, but the point is,
We did, however,
the point is,
Get them to-
Hinsdale doesn't have the same HPC power as Lake Forest does. So you can imagine that my teeth were itching, and we just decided to focus on the garden. And you know, everything about the house was built when they put the sewer system in LaSalle Street, where the Board of Trade ends, where all the banks and everything were. All of the clay brick was lifted, palletized, and sold for scrap. This man had a seat at the exchange, and he had a number of rail cars brought to Hinsdale. He built his driveway, his garden walls, his coach house, and his house, all out of these bricks. So it was an ancient house, day one. Fast forward till 15 years ago, we bought a house over on Waukegan Road, 3 houses that were part of the Elwa Farm complex. And A. Watson and Elsa Armour closed a meatpacking facility in Kansas City that was 100 years old. He had hired David Adler and Alfred Hopkins to do a gentleman's farm for he and his wife and family. And he wanted it to look like an English country estate. So they rail carred those 100-year bricks to build our buildings. So here, I had heard about this, you know, way back when, you know, 40 years ago, working for a client, and then here we buy a property that had a similar brick story. It was reclaimed, you know, material, and that was 1917 when our buildings were built. So I love when life kind of links patterns back into your reality or your presence. I think those delphinium you might have grown from seed.
we did grow those. Those are English delphinium,
Yeah.
English seed delphinium. Yep, that did.
We had the same gardener there, Robert Hernandez. We hired him. Does anybody remember Intrinsic Gardens? They used to be in Glenview,
Yeah.
at Greenwood and Kingston, maybe, or Green. I don't know if they crossed it. South of Lake Avenue. Robert was the lead gardener, and when they moved out to Hebron, Robert and his brother decided to stay closer to Chicago.
It's been with us since.
And he's been with us since. So that was since
And he was the gardener.
1984, 85. This man gardened this garden from day one.
Yep.
We moved him to the client's new house, the new
And he's
little
there
house.
with them.
She said, we're only moving if we can move with Robert. He's told us he's retiring in 5 years. This is the 11th year he's told us that. So, I mean, he just, he's a wonderful man.
Yeah.
And one day he bragged about, I think I've got the tallest delphinium of the year. And it was on Woodley Road. It wasn't at this garden. And I said, let's see. And they had to stake them with a ladder. And it was 9 foot tall.
Wow.
And each floret was the size of a tennis ball. It was amazing. It was Jurassic Park. It was like we were in Alaska. And I said, how did you do this? And he said, pinche
Don't tell.
fertilizer. You know,
What kind of fertilizer?
pinche. It's Spanish for
yeah.
dirty.
Manure.
Yeah. I think what it was is that they were just so religious about taking Russ's concoction, which is a combination of all things organic that
Yep.
are
Yeah.
that are not high nitrogen, and they just knew the right time, the right day. When you read about sowing seeds on a full moon, things like that. Some of the people that work with us, they live with the sun and the earth, you know what I mean? And they're lucky enough to find their craft and,
Yeah.
and their place with us. So that's why we can do some of the things we do.
Jose Ochoa, who worked with us and just retired a couple of years ago, when we had moved away from the Winthrop Harbor facility with the growing and moved over to Wadsworth, after we had sold it to the waste management team, Jose went back and he had to take the honey locust out of, we had taken the honey locust out of the property, and Jose went back and collected hollyhocks because the two of them were growing together and they were friends, and so he dug the hollyhock and planted them next to where we put the honey locust at Craig's house. So those are the kind of people who
The sensitivity is alive and well at our company.
Yeah.
But
But back to the talk.
Go ahead.
So this artful collaboration, I'll start it out.
It's for sale.
I was gonna say it's 7.3.
Yeah, 7.5.
Yeah, 7.5. It's for
It's on
sale.
the corner of
in
Lake Road and Woodland.
Yep.
It's the old Crow House.
Anybody know that?
Howard Van Dorn Shaw.
Howard Van Dorn Shaw. Honestly, Craig, this is your story with Rosemary.
So I'll tell you the design story, and Russ can tell you the care story.
Sure.
I was lucky enough our first Lake Forest client was Posey Craybill. Okay, it's a good place to start.
Yeah.
And she was our biggest retail customer, and she kept us afloat. And Peggy and Jack Crow decided to buy a summer house in Lake Forest. They lived down in Chicago. They started in Hinsdale, went to Chicago, and then came up to Lake Forest. And Jack and Peggy went to Chelsea with Posey one year and met Rosemary Berry. And they fell in love with her, and they said, Rosemary, will you come to Lake Forest and do a garden for us? And she said, only if I can do it with Craig Bergmann. And Jack didn't know me. And first time he met me, he said, how the hell do you know Rosemary Berry? And I said, well, I've known her for, 10 years. I've had tea in her garden. She came to talk for us, and I've been to talks with her. And we're in the American Man's Garden book that she did. And it just was funny because people sometimes look far afield to find something that's right in your town, right? So we got the seal of approval from England to work in Lake Forest on this job. And it was wonderful because she designed the space, and it was obviously a wonderful old house, and she activated a terrace garden connection on the south end of the house, which is what this image is, that when the house was purchased, there was just this giant wall of old yews that were just carved into, it was the size of a bus. I mean, and you couldn't see past the garden room into the green space beyond. And she said, well, let's just take these down and carve this, and Jack, tell your guys to, prune this and prune that. And she, of course, is talking like a person that lives in a climate that grows 24/7. And here that doesn't happen. But she, I would bring her back. She'd say camellias. I'd say leatherleaf viburnums. She would, and so we. And at the time, John Brooks was doing the English wall garden at the Botanic Garden, and he's a friend of mine too. And Posey got us all together for a dinner party, and Christopher Lloyd was there, and and I was at the table with all these people because I had figured out a way of meeting them across the years, either going around the United States when they were coming to visit, or if we were lucky enough to go to Chelsea or do a garden tour in England, I'd search people out. And like I said, all gardeners are friendly and giving. It doesn't matter whether you have a fancy title. If you're truly a gardener, you take the time to share what you know with who want to listen. But this garden would not look the same if it hadn't been a collaboration between Rosemary's vision and my interpretation. And Russ is the gardener for this garden, and he has been since the day it was installed. So that's a long time.
Yeah, working with people through the years, you garden for their state of their current status in life, and as folks like these folks worked with me through the years, it was great to get to know them, build a relationship, and initially the kids were still there, and they've subsequently been married and had children of their own, and their children have been married right on the property. But working with these folks, they'd come back from a trip somewhere and they'd want to develop the next phase, and talking with them and just sharing those experiences that they want to, again, adapt to their current situation in this house, in this state. That for many of our gardeners is what it's all about. So,
what's fun is the initial design shows the framework for the garden to grow in, and the plants tell you whether they're happy or not.
Oh, yeah.
And after a while, the client is really tired of paying for more plants, right? So if some of those plants that you thought were going to be great aren't great anymore, it's interesting. The longer you garden in a place, the more you have to change the garden. Like a garden that starts out with very rich, heavy, moisture retentive soil, after it's gardened in it for 10 years, it can be very free draining and not moisture retentive anymore. We have certain gardens that used to grow great as steel bee. Now it's too dry for a steel bee. But the foxglove seeds come back. We can grow our own foxglove. So it's interesting, you have to grow with the garden, and you have to know and anticipate what's happening.
Yeah.
You got to speak plant.
you have to speak to that.
Let's go to the next one.
Yep.
Here's the only commercial job we have in the book, I think, which
Yep.
is Deer Path Inn. We verified with Paul Bergmann, whose father worked in the Stanley Anderson office when Stanley worked on Deer Path Inn. He started in 1939 after the fire. And again, the secretary of the CEO of Abbott called and talked to me and said, I was told that if there's supposed to be an English-style garden in Lake Forest, you're supposed to make it. And I said, well, who said that? And they said, well, we won't tell you. Come to find out, it was the CEO's right-hand president at Abbott, and we had worked for he and his wife. And so I walk into Miles White's office, and he says, so what's the big deal about your work? And I said, I'm good at it. I said, what's the big deal about yours? And over the years, my forthrightness and honesty with everybody that we work with and work together for, it goes a long way. And many, many times, a wife of a husband-wife couple will say, my husband walked out in the garden before he got to the train to see if the tree peony bloomed. Or he came home early tonight so we could celebrate the garden on the patio. I never used to see him before 7 o'clock, whatever. Those, when a garden can change your life for the better and kind of create a better home life, we're doing our right thing. And you get kind of cocky after a while. If we get enough of those accolades, you want to do better and better. And most of the people the kids have graduated from high school and are in college or maybe even on their own, many of the people keep their houses longer because of their garden. And originally it used to be, people would move out right away and downsize or whatever, but they realized that a garden gives you some similar joy that maybe a family member does. So, and if it's a good garden. And they feel like it's theirs, not us building it for them. They have to be part of it. So we had fun with that. Moving on. House of the Four Winds on Laurel. We were lucky enough to work for the Redfields, who had lived there for decades. And when they could afford to do the garden, they started with us. That was great, is that all of the historic masonry was restored by Bill and masonry by Fernando. The real fountain was already done. I just had to criticize where they put the fountain equipment, and we covered it up. Actually, we moved it and then covered it up. But interesting, when you work with old historic properties, the vision that was original to the property may not be able to be restored or reenacted. This particular property had been subdivided, and the coach house next door is somebody else's house. And the sunken garden was conceived by Shaw, and he had gone to Alhambra, and the garden itself with the water features coming out of walls and a rill and a fall, all of it was inspired by that trip. And to be somebody that inherits the architecture of the garden, and you have the responsibility to make it work for what the light and the soil conditions were today, was a challenge, because when it was originally conceived, that central space was full sun, and the historic archives that are in the city of, that we got a lot from preservation, it was a hybrid tea rose garden. Well, hybrid tea rose gardens are as toxic as you can get to the environment, right? And they're pretty ugly half the year when they're dormant. So we were able to convince the client to not truly restore it, but to reimagine it. And there's a big giant American elm, one of two. The other pair succumbed to Dutch elm, but this big elm has a canopy up and over, and there was a big green ash that replaced the elm and grew on the other side. That ash has since died. But interestingly, we just worked for the people who were passionate about this property. He mowed his own lawn because he had the original lawnmower, and he owed it to the property to keep that going. It was that kind of
And he knew how to
intent.
maintain it too.
Yeah.
That machine was.
But this project won lots of awards, a lot of tours, always the house too. But it was called the House of the Four Winds because the house was built at a time pre-air conditioning. It was on a knoll, and all the bedrooms are in a line that come off a single hallway. And if you open your bedroom door, the hall window, and your bedroom window, you have cross ventilation. And the master bedroom is at the south end that overlooks the garden. And when the Redfields moved in, they inherited a crewel embroidered canopy bed from Bill's mother. And it was burgundy and blue and purple with hints of magenta on ivory background. And when they showed, if you knew the Redfields, you saw every room of the house and every piece of the garden whenever you go. So I got to see their bedroom the first time I met them. And I said, could this be the color scheme of the garden? And Lynn started crying because it was like, reactivating the life of someone who was passed. And it worked out wonderfully. And it kept my enthusiasm chromatically limited, And then Russ and I figured out, okay, this is full shade, this is part shade, let's watch the sun, what time of year, all this kind of thing. And it was not deer fenced. And the sunken garden was home for birthing on a regular basis, 2 at a time. So the sunken space had to be deer-proofed aesthetically, and the space between the house before you got to the stairs to take you into the sunken space was free-for-all for anybody to eat, roam, whatever. So the whole mint family of sages and salvias and Russian, perovskias and calaminthas, all of those minty scented plants are not attractive to deer or rabbits. So that's what we did the beds up above. And we enclosed the sunken space with Carpinus, a variety named Franz Fontaine that has tight little internodes, so when it makes a hedge, it's very rigid, so a deer can't push through it. But before those saplings grew thick, we built a rebar fence that was 8 feet tall, and every 2 feet was a rebar lateral that we lashed together. So while the trees were maturing, we had a fence on the upper surround. And once the trees were matured, the maintenance department, the garden care department, took off the rebar. But it really worked. And it was fun because we were damned to not make the enclosure ugly. This space was so beautiful. We needed to revere it every step of the way. And we kept old trees. We actually, the Smithsonian had old archival photographs, so the fastigiate arborvitae that had been deer mowed, we replaced with fastigiate carpinus at the top. The little ante room off to the left, which we renamed the stroll garden, as we were taking out the buckthorn and the box elders and everything had grown over it, we found the old concrete poured in place edging for a very intricately pathed garden. And we did our own archaeological dig and reset all the edging, and then just let the edging be the real lead. We already had a colorful garden. It was a textural garden that emphasized the shape of the space. So projects like that are really inspiring. When you're, we were channeling Howard Van Doren Shaw. It was fun. This is across the street, almost across the street from Camp Rosemary, another Shaw house with an Italianate garden. The balustrade you see used to enclose a swimming pool that was taken out in the 50s, 1950s. So when we inherited this project, it was derelict. I mean, there was a couple of big old U's and
Nothing much that was
nothing
useful.
much in that retaining wall. The first winter while we were designing, the buttresses on the retaining wall fell off. So there was a water feature at the end, not in the middle. The center of the garden is vegetated, it's not water, which is interesting for an Italian garden. But the pool originally was narrow and it looked like a canal. So of course we emulated that with plants. And the rambling clematis and roses and the like on the balustrade help bring the garden to another level. And then there's a set of stairs that take you up to the sunroom, which is on axis with the garden. And we took out a solid panel of paving and put a tapestry, a creeping time rug in the middle. So it was like the vegetation was creeping its way into the house. And we were lucky enough to restore all the historic water features. The carpentry was underway being restored, and we got it all restored. So The architecture was restored, but the plant collection was reinterpreted. This one is an old coach house that's set off the road. This is across the street from Camp Rosemary. It's on, it's 899 Rosemary, so it's the coach house behind the big house. That's the old Mitchell place. Interestingly, if you look at the main house today, it looks Gothic. The original house was Victorian styled, like the coach house still is. There was a fire, and when the Victorian house was rebuilt, it was rebuilt in a Gothic style instead of following the Queen Anne style of the original. We've been on this property, this is the second owner, and that the building on the right is a new construction, relatively new. It was built in the 90s. It's new to the property in that respect. But Tom Reikovic, who's a wonderfully classically oriented architect, was recommended by us and hired by the client. And the one stall wood crooked shed that sat on the edge of the ravine was the detached garage. And the coach house, which is what this was for the old estate, the garage function went away when the coach house was converted to a livable home. And the owners decided to do a coach house for the coach house. And you can see the roof that's facing you. The dormers are for a guest apartment above, and then there's a 3-car garage below, and a potting shed wing that sticks out the back, which I advocated for. The same summer that building was completed, do you remember way back when there was a hailstorm in the middle of August in Lake Forest? It ruined a lot of terracotta tile roofs, slate roofs, and everything. The old coach house had the original slate, and it was ruined. Luckily, the owners had Chubb insurance, and we were able to replace the coach house to match the old coach house roof matches the new coach house roof. So now they look as if they're of the same fabric. And that was Mother Nature saying, okay, these don't look very good together. I can fix this. Over the years, you think differently about properties when you grow old with them. And in this case, we had to come up with some different ideas from what the original design was, because it's different owners. Everybody has a different story. There used to be an old greenhouse that tucked on the back of the old coach house, and instead of demolishing the foundation that was still there, we made the new patio the shape of the old greenhouse. And interestingly, it comes off the back of the house, and it's on axis with the big open garden space in the distance. So just by recycling something and reinterpreting it in a different way, it changed the orientation of how one experiences the property. That center piece with the granite edged beds, that was just something to kind of dimensionalize the fact that we had this long herbaceous border. And sure, it was colorful and pretty, but the lawn was boring. Historically, for the old estate, it used to be an orchard. And as the orchard trees died, we tried to say, it would be great to do an orchard with old roses and daffodils, and he planted, the previous owner, like 10,000 daffodils in that lawn. But over the years, the care of the fruit trees didn't happen. And as you know, if you don't care for a garden, things change. So we made this more decorative, and it's Allium Millennium and Geranium Roseanne and grape hyacinths, and there's something purple in there from May to November, and they're all hardy plants. This is a fun one.
Sister house.
Sister houses. These are Art Nouveau styled houses. Architect
Mayor
in the 20s, and we were hired 15 years before we were hired for this one. We worked on the one next door, and they wanted a typical landscape with
completely opposite,
with ground cover and hydrangeas and pink zonal geraniums and box, right? I did ask, behind the tennis court, there's a pile of brick that matched the house and some stone carving, and I said, what's this? And they said, well, it's the old pergola that used to be on the portico that used to be on the front of the house. It was in such ill repair, the previous owner decided to take it off and store it in case somebody wanted to spend the money to do it, put it back on. And they said, what do you think?
It's bad.
And I said, put it back. And there was 3 bricks that were missing and 2 pieces of cut stone. They had saved all of those bits.
Wow.
And it had been sitting there for 20 years, which was really great, that nobody had messed with it. The landscaper didn't use it to, prop open a door and lose something. But very simple, sunken space with ground cover slopes. And there was an oval in the one that we had worked on before with boxwood and some pink landscape roses. And this lady was inspired by Camp Rosemary. And she said, I want my own version of Camp Rosemary. And she and her husband bought their dream garden with the gorgeous house. But really she bought it for the potential for the garden. And within the first year of her buying this, her husband died. And he had just finished all the detailing of his wine cellar. He was a vintage wine collector, and he never got to drink wine out of his cellar. So she said, you know what? My Roberto was the man of my life. We're doing this. And she just stayed there, and she had a 100-year-old party for her house a couple of years ago that we went to. And she's a gardener. And
Her
she
nails were dirty today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She hires us to fix things, which Posey used to do. She said, every 3 years you're going to have to come back and fix it. And she also said, what should I do next? So it's wonderful when somebody's just always inspired by a trip or by something they've seen. And she has contract growing going on for her seasonal plants. She goes to Home Depot, Lowe's, in 4 different towns in April and May. Her driveway is always full of potted stuff. And then we help make sense of it, by when we put it together. The slopes were converted to herbaceous planting, and that first summer when we did it, it was after Roberto died. We put a big bank of quickfire hydrangea in that faced the house. And she said, oh my God, those are so beautiful. Robert would have loved them. And I said, well, that's why we're giving them to you. So when somebody loses a pet, like a dog, we give them dogwood. If they live a mom or a grandma, we ask what their favorite flower was. And all of a sudden the lilac shows up. Or, to celebrate life with life is what we try to do every day. And if somebody needs a little perk, we're going to try to perk it. This is a fun one. It was just on a big tour. This is one you can talk to.
This is on Mayflower in Lake Forest.
Yeah.
The reference to we wanted to have everyone be able to see sort of the behind the scenes work. So throughout the book, we have included renderings and architectural drawings to be able to allow everyone to see the master plan to the creation. That's step in the process. I was able. This is Charrington Drake's home, old home, not currently, and she and I worked together, and it's again working with another client that you share feelings of being able to just immerse yourself in a garden space, and the experience to collect. She's a woody plant collector, and so the experience to be able to collect plants with her and morph the garden was a great experience.
And she has a master's in botany.
Yep.
So she truly is a botanist.
She would challenge, often challenge about
Often,
what
yeah.
plants I've chosen, what names I'm using. So
Yeah. She still does today.
She still does.
Yes.
And when we
Yeah.
overwintered plants for her, I killed a fuchsia, and I've never been able to live it down.
Yeah. It was the greenhouse, not you.
It was
Yeah.
the greenhouse, not
Yeah.
me.
The wall was it was a very beautiful walled space, and it would have been a great place to refilm the secret garden, because you go through the gate and it's like, oh my God. But the wall an original space was designed by Ellen Biddle Shipman, and it was a Shaw house. And it was the old Swift house. I don't know if you grew up in Lake Forest. The Swifts had it for a long time. That was the first house that we were pushed to meet the 100-year birthday party of the house. So we've had 4 houses in our history of getting the houses ready for their birthday, which has been fun.
I didn't remember that this shot had the actual clematis. It's hard to see, but that's clematis tangutica, not tangutica, the blue one, bluebird. It had grown 15 feet up into that climbing hydrangea.
Yeah. And historically, the wall was historic, but that house had a climbing hydrangea with a caliper this big, and it was 42 feet long. It had gone both directions on top of that wall. Just so much fun to meet a plant that's older than you. This is a great one. Again, second owner. We did the garden for the first owner, and the second owner took it and ran with it further. When this house was built in 1923, it was inspired by Polish country architecture. It had a black asphalt roof, white texturally modeled stucco with plaster insets of lots of decorative elements, and then those gorgeous lead gutters that have the grapevine, on them. It's just a gorgeous, gorgeous house. And when our client who we worked at, the house they had, the giant delphinium, they moved when they merged families after the wife had died. That was delphinium. The combined family needed a big house, so they moved into this big house. And the daughter's room, 1 out of 7 kids, 1 daughter, 2 merged families. Her Rapunzel suite was that gable in the top that they added. But that faces south, and this house and 4 other houses all face a shared freshwater pond in Indian Hill in Winnetka. And it was so much fun to have real water. It wasn't storm detention. It truly was a spring-fed pond. And all of those reeds that you see there are not cattails. They're yellow flag iris. And when you see that bloom, it's so, so beautiful. So of course we built a pier, out, and they always had kayaks or canoes there. And this garden it was up, elevated. There was an old garden wall, and it faced full south. It was hot space. So we added a pergola, but to be referential to the house, we didn't attach it to the house. The house for me was sacrosanct. It really was important to leave it alone. But interestingly, again, one of these subdivided parcels, the driveway went past this house on the east side, wrapped around the north side. You had an opportunity to drive into this yard, but you could also pass and go to 3 other houses further on. So it's kind of like the shared driveway was a street. And it was weird because when you were at your kitchen sink, you could see your neighbors drive by, if you didn't have your shirt on, they'd see whatever you were wearing, So we did a compound of, we created a cloister out of the architecture and did additional walls, and it screened a swimming pool, it screened a herb garden, a hot tub, all these things. But again, nothing was attached to the house, but it was baffles and layers, and we're still improving for these folks, and their kids are long gone. They would never move from this house. They love it. Not all of our houses or projects are at a grand scale. They can be intimate, they can be little. This was a little house on top of a hill. The name of it's Pennybryn. In Welsh, it means house on the hill. And it was built by an excommunicated priest in 1928, and it had wood lentils, lead glass windows, and an outhouse. And over the years, throughout the owners, it kept improving. And my partner James and I at the time, we bought this house as a second home, and we had this for 15 years. And it was really fun to unlandscape something and put it back into the woods. It was on top of an 85-foot tall sand dune. And there were no steps originally, so you used to have to walk up 110 steps from the road up to the house. So we cut a driveway up the hill, recycled a flower show Peter Rabbit shed from something that was our garage, and then these stones. First time I used a crane. We did big Wisconsin Lannon stone slabs, and we made a front walk to the house from the driveway. But each one of those slabs, because this was a half a block from the lake, each one of the slabs had the waves of the sand that had hardened geologically, so they looked like we were on the beach. And but we were in the woods. So
Hey, Craig?
yeah,
Where is that? What town?
Bridgman, Michigan.
Okay.
We don't know anything about this job.
Yeah, this is our home and office on Waukegan Road. We were talking, referencing Aloha Farm. This is the southeast corner of the original Aloha Farm property, which when it was first developed by Armour, it was 128 acres. And as the second family, the Carrolls owned it, it expanded to 250 acres. So that's the locust tree the Russ was referencing that has the hollyhocks growing below it. Interestingly, the hollyhocks died. We put yews underneath them. The yews shaded out the hollyhocks. That was about 3 years ago. In the same damn place, native milkweed grew there. They're this tall with seed pods today, and it's perennialized. It's the same plants, but they grew in the same place the hollyhocks were. It just was like it needed to tell the garden story over and over again. And it's like, you're not moving. You know, you just have to go native now. You can't be cultivated. You got to be a native plant.
These are the best gardeners on the team.
Yep. Chipmunk control. So, and to show you how tall those dogs are, a grape hyacinth is this tall. You know, so Pepper, we lost Pepper last summer. Watson's still with us. He's named for A. Watson Armour, because when our house turned 100, we got Watson. So obviously we're a subdivision of the 120 some acres. Our property line is peculiar. You know, there's kind of got that weird diagonal in the northwest corner. But Waukegan Road is on the right. Adrian and Nancy Smith's house is to the south. And then the Acorn Trail house development is on the other side, on the west side. Come visit us, 9 to 5. You want to come see sometime, you're more than welcome. Enjoy the book if you buy it. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions?
I haven't read through the book, so I don't know, but you mentioned all the houses. You're talking of really older properties. Have you done any work with newer homes, like in the 80s or 90s?
As you know, the North Shore is mostly old houses unless you go to Winnetka, right? And now everything's being torn down, right? I would say 60% of the work that we do is redoing old house landscapes, and they could be from the 80s, the 1880s to the 2000s. We do all styles of homes, but because this is a preservation organization, we wanted to kind of focus in. We have 4 brand new houses on the boards right now, so we do all ages, all styles, if we are a good match for the project and the client. So, yeah, you're such a good listener. You were always like smiling and listening.
So I was really fascinated when you started talking a little bit about aging in place. It was something I've been reading a little bit about, is like extending the lifespan of a home with like set and movement in the garden. You've obviously done that. How do you balance that with the heritage of the garden itself?
Financially or emotionally? Okay. I think that reality has to help lead the way because fantasy will take you off your track. Do you know what I mean? Paul and I, in a perfect world, we'd stay there till we die. And we have an option for first floor master and all that kind of thing. But if somebody really loved it and convinced me that they could do as good or better a job with it, I'd pass it on. So I think that, when some of these projects that have become so personalized, to have a garden that might be intimidating to someone else, one of the things we work with our clients to do is to, if they want to stay and they want it to be a little less expensive, we simplify. We pare it down. Or they move and we do a full-blown whatever because the scale is such that it's not going to break the bank. 30 years ago, I remember somebody saying, we moved from Green Bay Road to this little house on Washington, and now we can afford a Craig Bergmann garden. And I get it. Fast forward 20 years, we did the old house for the next owner. Do you know what I mean? So it really depends on where you're at. And honestly, if you're a family, where are your kids? We have a client that Russ and I have taken care of. They built a house in St. Charles on a big parcel, beautiful house. And she just bought a house on Sheridan Road across the street from the Presbyterian Church because she has 2 grown kids with grandkids in Lake Forest. And she called and said, is it okay if I buy this house because it's got one of your old gardens? And I said, only if I can, fix it. She said, well, of course. What do I bring? What do I leave? And it's because she was downsizing, but she didn't want her quality of life to change or her quality of garden. It was fine to be smaller. It's different because she's different, right? Reality. Yeah.
I have maybe the flip side of your question, which is if you have the opportunity to start again, and you're thinking about an entirety of a plot or a piece of land, but you need to start somewhere. How do you think about where do you get going? What's the kernel of it?
Have a friend that you can bounce ideas off of. Travel. Tap your all those magazines you haven't thrown out yet.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Right. We make a pact of every 2 months to look at that basket, which is always overflowing by 2 months. But I think that it's harder today than it was 40 years ago to decide what to do because there's so many options out there. With social media, with all kinds of access. You used to have to travel somewhere to see it. Now all you have to do is punch in the name in your phone and you get 100 images of it. I would also stress that don't let a photograph, which is a moment in time, steer all your solutions because that was primed for the moment and it could have been disassembled right after the photo. And one of the reasons we did the book is because a number of our gardens disappeared because the houses were torn down or the house was sold and somebody didn't want the garden. They put in the sport court, whatever, So really, partners in crime are really helpful. And hiring somebody that's done it before and is not experimenting with you, I think that's helpful.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, you bet.